I just wanted to record a short video on an aspect we have currently, the square between Jupiter and Saturn, that we have between now and the middle of next year. So I want to do this separately so I can refer you to it so I don't have to keep repeating it in all of the updates. But it is a very important cycle, both collectively and personally. And with any cycle, the seed point is really when the two planets come together. And Jupiter and Saturn, some of you may remember, came together. It was known as the Great Conjunction at the Capricorn solstice 2020, December 2020. And this is a reliably repeating conjunction every 20 years. But what's interesting about it is that it repeats every 20 years in a particular element. And up to December 2020, it had been repeating in the Earth signs. Apart from, I think, in 1981, there was a short dart into Libra, but apart from that, it was in Earth signs. And what it tends to do is set up the sort of social and political backdrop or zeitgeist for our times. So really coming out of the Industrial Revolution, which was, 1830s, 1840s, it was really Jupiter and Saturn that started to define that period of materialism. You were defined by your wealth or your status. It was very much about long-term social structures. It was about, long-term job, long-term home. And to a large extent, it encouraged a kind of hierarchical status, because it was all about, if you're wealthy and you had a certain title, you were superior in some way over others. So that was very much connected to, I think, the Earth cycle for Jupiter Saturn. However, Capricorn solstice, December 2020, it moved on to 0 degrees of Aquarius. And Aquarius, as you know, is an air sign. And this was known as the Great Conjunction because it not only begins roughly another 200 years of conjunctions every 20 years in air signs, but it essentially begins a whole new 800-year cycle of that 20-year conjunction repeating in air for the next 200 years, and then onto fire and water, I believe it is. So very different backdrop qualities. And air is social. It's about social connections, networks, ideas. It's speedy. It's way speedier than heavy, slow Earth. Aquarius in particular is around issues of freedom, human rights, social rights. It's about community, collaboration, innovation of all kinds, technological innovations, new paradigms, all that sort of thing. And that 0 degrees of Aquarius, of course, is being highly activated by Pluto for the next 2 years, because Pluto is crisscrossing that 0 degrees of Aquarius. So whatever Saturn and Jupiter represented at the conjunction, Pluto is activating it. Okay, so where are we now? Now we are at what is called the first square, the opening square between Jupiter and Saturn since that conjunction. So this happens with every two planets that come together. They have the seed point, they have the conjunction like a new moon phase, and then over a period of time, depending on their orbital speeds, they come to their first opening square. So currently Jupiter and Saturn are 90 degrees from each other. So this is the first testing point, if you like, of what that conjunction represented. So, for instance, individually and collectively, it's asking the question, how far have you come in terms of those issues around freedom, human rights, civil rights, etc.? Now, Pluto is very much, as I say, activating that point. In fact, from the end of this year, from 19th of November, Pluto will be in Aquarius for another 20 years. But it's roughly crisscrossing that 0 degrees of Aquarius for the next 2 years. So let me now talk about Jupiter-Saturn square. Sometimes with a square, or any aspect actually, it's a one hit deal, it's a one hit wonder. But with retrogradation, very often we have the same aspect hitting 3 times. It hits the first time, it opens up a question or an issue. It hits a second time, and you're then at the midpoint of there's another step in the development of that issue. And then the third time, it reaches its completion. So that's what we're going to be looking at here. So at the moment, we are really at the first opening square. So let us now move on and look at the chart for that first point. So let us now look at the first chart. And all I really want to focus on here is the square between Jupiter and Saturn. So here we have Jupiter at 17 of Gemini, and we have Saturn at 17 of Pisces. This doesn't look like 90 degrees. Believe me, it's because I'm using a Placidus house system and it's a bit squiffy. This is 90 degrees. They're both at 17 degrees. Now, this will apply to everybody. So look in your own birth chart and see where 17 degrees of Gemini, 17 degrees of Pisces, where those 2 points are falling in your chart. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. You can go to this link below and get a 2-part video series that will take you from zero to understanding where these points are in your chart for every update I do. It's not a personalized birth chart analysis. These are teaching videos. Okay, so where Jupiter falls, this is normally a process of, and sorry, just to say, if you have anything between about 15 and 19 degrees of the mutable signs, and those are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces, you are going to be feeling this quite strongly, any planets or aspects, but everybody is going to have these somewhere, even if they're not specifically aspecting planets or angles. Where Jupiter is falling is usually about a sense of expansion or success, recognition. It can be abundance sometimes, particularly if it's falling in your second house, your 8th house. Because it's in Gemini, this is particularly about new ideas. It's very restless, lots of new ideas. It wants to connect socially, because Gemini is a very social sign. It could be very creative, particularly for writing projects. Gemini is linked to writing, particularly. It's very mercurial, so you can be hopping here and hopping out, lots and lots of ideas, very restless energy. It's a little bit, I always think of it like Puck in Shakespeare, hopping here, hopping there, not necessarily landing on anything for the long term. And actually, I'd suggest that's probably just as well, because this is the kind of beginning of this 3-hit process. Mars is also energizing all of this. And this can make us start to think about future horizons, travel. Jupiter's very linked to travel, idealism, bigger dreams, let's say. So very much thinking futuristically. And so see which house area that's falling, because that's very important to identify to really get the meaning for you. Now, Saturn is almost an opposite principle. If Jupiter's about expansion, Saturn's about contraction. It is excellent for focusing down on very specific objectives because it narrows the mind. So it can be excellent if it's in your 3rd house. I did a lot of my study for astrology when Saturn was moving through my 3rd house. It was excellent for exams, focusing the mind on studying. It can be very, very productive also in the 9th house. Just see where it's falling. As I've mentioned recently, I have Saturn on my IC at the moment, kind of moving into the 4th house. I have had dozens of plumbing issues. So Saturn, work, repairs, Pisces, water in the 4th house of the home. It's been extraordinary. So Saturn can make us focus on work, repairs, things that have to be fixed. It's certainly more introspective, particularly because Saturn is retrograde here. There's a turning inwards. Pisces can be quite introverted anyway. And so this can make us want to hermit very much. It's about turning inwards. Do you want a more meditation, more alone time? I mean, that tends to be Pisces anyway, but particularly Saturn retrograde in Pisces will emphasize that. You may want a more disciplined spiritual practice coming in. And I'm not going to talk about the rest of this chart. This is actually happening at an absolute doozy of a full moon that we have on the 19th of August, an absolute doozy. So I'll do that in the next update video. But Saturn can represent the end of the matter. It can be quite karmic, the closing down of an episode. Very much so, an ending, closing, completion. And of course, full moons in general are very often, it's the completion of the moon cycle, the peak of the moon cycle. They can be about closure, completion, end of that episode. Now, working together, as I mentioned in the last video, when we integrate these two together, this can be very productive for planning, cautiously planning, strategically planning, some long-term structure, Saturn, that we're building for the future, Jupiter, that has a spiritual component, a spiritual context to it. So, and this could be, you could be doing this with friends, Gemini, with colleagues, with your soul tribe, to really construct something longer term that you're building for the future. And this, of course, is linked to the Aquarius energy, because Pluto is sitting right on 0 degrees of Aquarius, where the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction was at the end of 2020. So all of this is being highly activated. I would say at this point in this 3-hit process, stay flexible. I mean, Gemini, mutable signs are excellent for flexibility anyway. Can kind of hop from one foot to the other. It's very adaptable. Gemini in particular can do that. Very, doesn't fix on anything, doesn't make a decision. It's opening up the options. It's opening up the options. And wherever these are falling in your chart, I'd suggest best not to go too much further than opening up the options in terms of your thinking. Yes, great to travel as well and explore new possibilities, but don't necessarily, I'd suggest, come to decisions at this point. Okay, so that's the first step, if you like, in this process. So I'm going to stop sharing this and move on to our next one here. Okay, so the next time that Saturn and Jupiter come into a square, they're at a slightly different point. They are now at 14 degrees of the mutable signs. Saturn was retrograde at the first square. It's now moving direct. Jupiter was direct at the first square. It's now moving retrograde. So this is very interesting. So this is Christmas Eve. So if you have anything between 13 degrees and 16 degrees of the mutable signs, you'll be feeling this more strongly at this time. So all of the same kind of themes still apply, really. Remember, Jupiter, wherever it's falling, as I say, can bring more success, more recognition, more abundance. It can expand whatever it touches. So that's part of this process too. I've got a very inexpensive video that talks about Saturn and Jupiter moving through the different houses of the birth chart. So I'll put the link for that below. It's very simple, very inexpensive, and it takes you from 0 to understand the house meanings more fully. But Jupiter tends to expand the meaning of that house area, but generally brings in recognition, abundance, expansion of whatever it's moving through. So, Saturn is continuing to question what's ending, what's shutting down, what's no longer helping your growth to move forwards. It's the end of a chapter. However, all the excitement and the new possibilities and the visions that Jupiter had at the first square are a little more pulled back. They're a little more introspective here, a little more, well, let me reflect, possibly because we've just had Pluto moving through Capricorn for the very last time in about 230 years, from 2nd of September to 19th of November. And that will have given a slight feeling of, oh, are we moving back? Are we moving back to the old world and the old order? Well, the answer to that is no, but there may have been that kind of a feeling, last gasp of that old order. And so that may have made Jupiter a little more cautious about let's leap forwards to these new future visions. So again, just reflect, continue to explore options, but again, don't necessarily jump forwards in your decision making. And so, it's just going to be an awful lot of change will have happened in the world by the 24th of December, an awful lot of change. And the final time in this 3-hit process, and I'm not going to show the chart here because I want to keep it very simple, but this is in a very different place. This happens on the 15th of June, 2025. But remember, these aren't just for 3 days. August this year, December this year, June next year. This is a process that's happening kind of in the background for you, if you like. And Jupiter and Saturn have moved on to different places at this point. Jupiter is at 1 degree of Cancer, direct. Saturn is at 1 degree of Aries, the creator degree. Both of these are what I call the world axis, because 0 of the cardinals within 2 degrees either way, that is known as the world axis. So both of these planets are square on the world axis at 1 degree of Aries, Saturn, Jupiter, Cancer. As they're both direct, and this is the final hit, the final third square before Jupiter starts to move on, because it moves much faster than Saturn. As we know, it has a 12-year orbit. Saturn has a 29.5-year orbit. This really suggests a new episode for you. And that's particularly because Saturn and Neptune are already beginning to enter Aries. They will do that holding hands fully in February 2026. But nevertheless, we have a much greater feeling of forward momentum, of new beginnings in general for the world. I see the rest of 2024, yes, they're new beginnings for sure, but the endings are going to be loud. The endings are going to be very loud. So we may have a sense more through the rest of 2024 of endings. Yes, you can be working away with your new beginnings, but they will be really moving forwards more fully in 2025. These are cardinal signs. They are initiatory, Aries and Cancer. You may be thinking more about travel, Jupiter. You may be thinking about where your home is going to be, Cancer. Where your home is going to be, who your royal family is. Is it your biological family, your blood family, or is it your family frequency? Because of Pluto being in Aquarius for the next 20 years now at this point. Is it your soul tribe? Is it the people you've met locally, physically, or online who you're going to be moving forwards into the future with, to buy land, to grow food? And So this is a really, really powerful time. Pluto, as I say, now fully in Aquarius for 20 years. Um, all of the outer planets are starting to break loose, as it were, from heavy earth and water signs into air and fire. So Saturn, Neptune have already begun to move into Aries here. And we also have Gemini, we also have Uranus just about within a month going to move out of Taurus into Gemini. So we have it's an incredibly concentrated period of these outer planets changing sign into lighter, faster signs, more social signs, much greater innovation, much greater sense of community, collaboration, networks, ideas, new, new inventions of all kinds, new discoveries, new paradigms. So I hope that's helped you just simply to look at that Jupiter Saturn square, which is repeating 3 times. But do study your own chart, because this will have layers of meaning for you. Have layers of meaning. So I'd suggest up until June next year, whichever houses these are activating, whatever ideas are coming up, whatever possibilities, it won't land fully. They won't land fully, I'd suggest, until around June next year. An awful lot of change is going to happen in the world between now and next June. An incredible amount of change. So just cut yourself some slack, give yourself some space not to commit too fully to something that may all of a sudden the ground then starts to move under your feet because things have changed so drastically by next June. And in a good way, I'd like to suggest, in a very good way. So very exciting times, and I just wanted to take this aspect and look at it separately because it's kind of too much to cover in one new moon or full moon update. So God bless. Be back very soon. It's a super busy time that we are moving into. So I'll be back very soon with another video. God bless. Bye for now.